Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm your host, Sylvia Sena, and this is your news, weather, and sports update for 12 p.m. BCIT students were welcomed back to school this semester with a sudden price jump for parking at all campuses. And this caused backlash from students. Reporter Riley Lyons has more.
On February 2nd, BCIT students will be paying significantly more for parking at 3 of the school's main campuses. This has caused backlash from students in the form of a petition that now has over 1,700 signatures. The BCIT Student Association President Liam Lauren says that this incentivizes public transit, though not every student can reasonably use buses or the SkyTrain.
I also think there'll be a bit of a divide, though, because transit does take a long time for a lot of people, and that's something that I recognize myself.
Students who frequently drive to campuses can buy a monthly or weekly pass, which sees the price jump to 18%, as opposed to the daily rate of $68. I'm Riley Lyons for 1680 The Crow.
And now we are joined by Riley Lyons. Riley, why did BCIT go this direction with increasing parking costs?
Thanks, Sylvia. BCIT has stated in a newsletter that they changed the price of daily parking to fit other institutions similar to themselves. So it's likely that they took these new numbers from other schools and institutions in each campus around the campus's surrounding area.
And what can students do then to deal with the changes and minimize the financial impacts?
Well, there's going to be an economy lot on the Burnaby campus, which will be charging $5.50, which is the original parking price, and it will be first come, first served. The price increase is also lower if you're going to be buying long-term parking passes. But the biggest way to save money is for full-time students to utilize their UPass.
Thanks, Riley.
Thanks, Sylvia.
And the Coquitlam Public Library is holding a drag story time this weekend. But ahead of the event, some organizations are planning to protest outside the venue. Astrid Agbayani has the details.
The library says they've already had some pushback online. Last year, there was a small protest at their first event. According to the library, the goal of a drag story time across many libraries in Canada is to promote inclusiveness, kindness, and acceptance. They say they're expecting to have a similar experience with no incidents through the help of the Coquitlam RCMP to keep the event safe for families. 70 families joined the story time last year, and this year, supporters also plan to show up to help protect participants.
And now we are joined live with our reporter, Astrid. Astrid, what are the protesters against? Astrid? I guess we lost connection with our reporter. We'll try to get back to her as soon as we can. And the British Columbia business owners are expecting a spike in tourism from China, with Beijing lifting the pandemic restrictions after 3 years. Monica Leach, manager of market development for Asia Pacific with Destination BC, says operators have been anxiously awaiting for China's reopening.
First of all, China is a very important market for BC and for tourism to British Columbia. So we're anxiously been awaiting this fantastic news about the border reopening with respect to China. Of course, prior to the pandemic, China was BC's largest overseas market, and we welcomed visitors year-round.
And according to provincial tourism body Destination BC, Chinese travelers were the second biggest international market for the province in 2019, with more than 330,000 visits. And now let's go to our international news. COVID-19 restrictions imposed by Japan and South Korea have triggered a diplomatic dispute. Reporter Tom Rivers from ABC has more.
Japan and South Korea are defending restrictions on travelers from China a day after Beijing stopped issuing new visas in both countries in apparent retaliation. It's not clear whether China will expand the suspensions to other countries that have imposed similar stricter virus testing on passengers from China following its latest surge. Seoul says some 17% of the travelers who arrived from China over the past week tested positive. Tom Rivers, ABC News at the Foreign Desk.
And Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is meeting with Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador today as he wraps up his time at the North American Leaders Summit. Trudeau made a speech at Central University where he mentioned the controversial Trump era and the renegotiation of a North American free trade deal.
In the negotiations, the U.S. repeatedly tried to play off Canada and Mexico against each other. But Canada always believed that our greatest strength was in all three parties negotiating in unison.
Trudeau and López Obrador are expected to sign a declaration on Indigenous cooperation before Trudeau holds a new conference and then flies back to Ottawa. And a new report from global citizenship and resident advisory firm Henley & Partners revealed that for the fifth year running, Japan has the world's most powerful passport. Japanese citizenship are able to visit 193 destinations without a visa. South Korea and Singapore are second and third place, whose citizens can travel to 190 destinations visa-free. Canada is also near the top of the list, ranked 8th alongside with Australia, Greece, and Malta with 185 visa-free destinations. And after thousands of delays at the airport, after thousands of delays at airport across the U.S., the Federal Aviation Administration is lifting a group stop caused by a computer outage. Reporter Julie Walker from the Associated Press has more.
I have a lot of optimism that if those plans get implemented, if government...
The FAA ordered all U.S. flights to delay departures until 9 a.m. Airlines said they were aware of the situation and had already begun grounding flights. By 8 a.m., there were more than 3,500 delayed flights within, into, or out of the U.S., according to FlightAware. More than 150 have been canceled. Those numbers likely to grow. The White House said that there is no evidence of a cyber attack, but President Biden directed the Department of Transportation to investigate the cause of the disruption.
Aircraft can still land safely, just not take off right now. We don't know what the cause of it is.
The FAA says it's working to restore its notice-to-air missions system. Julie Walker, New York.
And a new report by the World Economic Forum says climate change is the global economy's biggest long-term challenge. But it is one the world is least prepared to tackle. Insurance risk expert John Scott says reaching the goals set out in the 2015 Paris Climate Agreement will be difficult, but it's not impossible.
I have a lot of optimism that if those plans get implemented, if government nationally determined reduction commitments are implemented and government long-term strategies are implemented, that we will get to a world that is getting close to the 1.7 or below 2 degree objectives of the Paris Agreement.
The World Economic Forum's annual gathering of business and government leaders begins next week in Switzerland. And at least 17 people have been killed since a series of powerful storms devastated California last month. Governor Gavin Newsom says the death toll is expected to rise. Reporter Matt Rivers says more than half of California's 58 counties have been declared disaster areas.
Tens of thousands of people currently under evacuation orders, hundreds of thousands of people hunkering down, dealing with everything from flooding to landslides to even lightning and hail in some parts.
Forecasters say more destructive weather is coming later this week. And the 8th annual Golden Globes returned to the air yesterday after last year's telecast was canceled by NBC. This year, Globes were hosted by comedian Gerald Carmichael, who addressed the scandal in his opening monologue, jokingly referring to himself as the black face of an embattled white organization. And that's for your news updates, folks. We'll be back in 60 seconds with your sports update. I'm your host, Steve Sena, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
This is sports on 1680 The Crow.
Welcome back to 1680 The Crow. I'm your host, Silvia Sena, and this is your sports update for 12 p.m. The Cars on Ice racing event in Ashcroft, British Columbia is set to kick off their season this weekend, but the threat of climate change and inconsistent weather patterns looms over the community. Ryan Bailey has more.
At Barnes Lake, just southeast of the village, the Cars on Ice event welcomes racers from all over the province every year. But the effects of climate change has made an impact on the event, which has been a staple in the community for 50 years. Mayor Barbara Roden says she has noticed an inconsistency in recent events.
I have noticed a pattern where the first race of the season has had to be pushed back to a later date because the ice simply isn't thick enough to support the weight of the vehicles.
The event this weekend is scheduled to go ahead, but they will be closely monitoring the temperature and ice levels. Ryan Bailey, 1680 The Crow.
And in the hockey news today, Vancouver Giants are playing for the first time tonight after trading their 19-year-old captain, Zach Ostapchuk, to Winnipeg Ice. The Vancouver team will be playing the Kamloops Blazer at 7 p.m. The Giants are in fourth place in the Western Conference with 38 points, while the Blazers are currently sitting at third place with 50 points. And in the NHL, the Toronto Maple Leafs will be playing tonight without their star center, Auston Matthews, as he's currently dealing with an undisclosed injury. The Leafs host the Nashville Predators, who currently sit just outside of the final wildcard spot in the Western Conference. Leafs coach Sheldon Keefe told reporters this morning that 26-year-old forward Bobby McMann will make his NHL debut in place of the injured Matthews. McMann was just named the AHL player of this week. And Dawson Mercer scored 2 goals for the New Jersey Devils in the 5-3 win over the Carolina Hurricanes. Mercer gave the Devils their first lead of the game at 8:53 of the third period on his 10th goal of the season. It's the first multi-goal game of his 123-game NHL career. Mercer described the win as a much-needed one against a Metropolitan Division opponent.
That's a big win for us to be down in the game and then make a comeback against a good defensive team like that. It shows a lot about us where you're never out of the game. And I think, like you said, those points are massive for us right now.
And Hurricane forward Sebastian Aho felt that the team didn't push back the way they needed to after giving up a lead.
We played a pretty good game till the end of the second, and obviously they scored a couple goals, but it shouldn't matter. We just should come back with the same intensity.
And with the NFL, Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin has been released from hospital more than a week after he went into cardiac arrest during an NFL game. Bills head coach Sean McDermott says the player will continue his rehabilitation with the Bills.
His health is first and foremost on our mind as far as his situation goes, and then when he feels ready, we welcome him back as he feels ready.
And these were your sports update for 12 p.m., folks. Stay tuned for the comment coming up next. I'm your host, Silvia Sena, and you're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
So, on today's comment, parking is going up. Way up, from $5.50 a day to $9.25 in Burnaby Campus, and from $12.75 to $20.25 at the downtown campus. According to BCIT, that's because prices have not increased in 8 years, and this brings them in. So, on today's comment, parking is going up, way up, from $5.50 a day to $9.25 in Burnaby Campus, and from $12.75 to $20.25 at the downtown campus. According to BCIT, that's because prices have not increased in 8 years, and this brings them in line with the cost of parking nearby. BCIT students are right to not be happy about this, both the increase and the way that it's been implemented. That's not to say that our institutions aren't chronically underfunded. They absolutely are. Parking and other incidental fees are some of the ways that they make up for the funding shortfall. But students are dealing with massive increases in costs of living in the past year. BCIT could have softened the blow by increasing the parking in increments, like 50 cents per semester till it's in line with the current rates. Instead, they decided to do it all at once, and it's going to harm the most vulnerable students. They're right to be mad about the way this has gone about. That was the comment. Gurpreet Kambo, 1680 The Crow.
Extremely important for people to stay healthy and to stay active as much as possible.
This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
Culture can be defined as all that a people are and do at any particular time and place.
Train of 38 Grinder, track section 2451.
The city is the focal point of a culture. In British Columbia, the Vancouver region. Vancouver, like all cities, is a dynamic entity pursuing a lifestyle which reflects yet transcends the lifetimes of the people whose interactions create the city. There comes a time in the life of a city, a point of maturity, when its growth and the growth of human interaction within it begin to conflict. The need for mobility calls for fundamental change.
And that change came in the form of today's episode of the Crow Chronicles, the Vancouver SkyTrain. I'm Richard Davis, a journalist who writes primarily about transportation and labor issues, and I am one of the 400,000 people, estimated, who rides the SkyTrain every single day. And I'm here with my co-host, Nicholas Poitras. Nick, why are you here?
I am also here because I am also one of the 400,000 people that ride the SkyTrain every day. I'm also a journalist, mainly a motorsport journalist. However, I very much enjoy talking about SkyTrain. I think transit is a very interesting thing for me. And for Richard, too. So much, in fact, that we're the type of people who would scheme up a fantasy SkyTrain line at lunch. But the main thing about it, though, as much as it might seem very, very weird to talk about it, we're not alone in this very interesting topic when we're talking about transit, especially SkyTrain.
Yeah, we spoke to Rob Chu. He is unequivocally the guy when it comes to transit history.
Absolutely the guy.
Rob is the guy. Before we talk to Rob and get him to take us back to what it was like on the day, Nick, what do you know about SkyTrain on the opening day and the history of it?
To be completely honest, not much. All I really know is that it was built around the time of Expo 86. And when that was happening, they're like, hey, let's use this as like the main thing to showcase. And then that's all I know. And then they built all the lines, the Millennium Line, the extensions, and everything that we know now.
Yeah. So let's go to Rob, and he's going to tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, so basically we're going to go into the development then on how we ended up with the SkyTrain. So way back when transit started in Vancouver in the 1890s, it was just all streetcars. And eventually the streetcar system grew and grew, but things got expensive, and expanding tracks wasn't cost effective in some places, so they started introducing gas buses. And then eventually diesel buses started coming in as well. And then it got to the point after the Second World War where it was just so expensive to maintain a streetcar system, most North American cities got rid of them, with the exception of places like Toronto. And you've got San Francisco that maintained a few lines there. Same with Philadelphia as well. So Vancouver, unfortunately, lost pretty much all of the streetcar systems. And by 1954, the last one, I can't remember, it was 1954 55, one of those years, the last streetcar ran down Hastings Street. And then the last interurban line ran in 1958. So that was done. Everybody's in their cars now. Everyone's driving. Freeways are coming. Everybody's going to move out to the suburbs. So that was the next big thing, or the next trend to happen in the 1950s and 60s, as with most North American cities. So you got all that traffic congestion and all. Vancouver wanted to build a network of freeways, just like LA and other cities. Had all these plans out. It's going to go right through the middle of Chinatown and Gastown. There's going to be a third crossing just by Stanley Park there to get people to the upper levels highway. Basically, there was a lot of opposition, and if that happened, a lot of these neighborhoods would have been destroyed. So basically, with all that opposition, we had to actually, City Council had to actually stop the freeway plans, and basically that whole thing was defeated. And then there was a need for rapid transit still. So, okay, to solve the problem, we have this new Burrard area rapid ferry that they're thinking of, and this is in the early 70s, that would cross from downtown Vancouver to somewhere in North Vancouver. Okay, let's get that started. Okay, that solves that one. We're working on that. But then there's something missing for the rest of the region. We need rail or something or express buses. So that's where they decide, okay, let's test out a light rail car from Germany. Let's buy one, bring it over. Never really got anywhere. Change in government and all. Mm-hmm. And basically, when the years went by, they decided, okay, let's try out this one here. There's this new technology originating from Ontario. That's advanced light rapid transit. Let's give that a shot. And then Vancouver's going to be hosting a World's Fair in the 1980s. Let's put this all together. And that's how you ended up with the SkyTrain eventually. It was a very expensive system. And that's where all the critics came out at the time and said, you should have stuck with light rail. Vancouver can't afford this. And they got funding from all levels of government. And then they said, hey, you know what? 1986, the World Fair is coming. And guess what the theme is? Transportation and communication. What better way to show off this fancy Canadian technology by bringing it to the World's Fair, where you get dignitaries like royalty, presidents, prime ministers, all coming here to see this. And that could be a boom for Ontario if they were to sell this product.
Ontario wasn't the only one showcasing stuff. As Stephen Gordon, who went to Expo 86, explains, other countries got into the transport fun as well.
Of course, the theme was transportation, so there was a lot of cool. Japan had their SST there, that a short section that you could go on the magnetic rails, back and forth. Obviously, you couldn't get really fast, just being a short section. But I mean, everything was cool. I mean, to me, when it had of all the expos, it's probably really blessed that they had this in Vancouver.
Now, as fancy as all those pavilions were, the backbone of transportation to get people into Expo 86 was the SkyTrain, and it used a little special method to do so, as Stephen explains.
At Stadium SkyTrain, of course, you look over to where you have that track over there, and that was a special train that you would board from Expo 86 to go to Waterfront, and then you would go to Canada Place, which was part of the Expo 86. So they had these special trains that would whisk you back and forth.
After learning about everything with Expo 86, it sounded really awesome. It's in Vancouver, it's in my hometown, and all these countries coming in to showcase all this brand new technology at the time. That sounds so awesome, and it's something I very much wish I could experience, and I wish I could go back to that time.
So, Nick, we both ride the SkyTrain, right? And I feel like it'd be fair to say that it's reliable, efficient, it gets you there on time, but most importantly, it gets you there safely, right?
Yeah, over the last few months of me taking it, I've had completely no problems, apart from obvious construction delays that, that's supposed to happen. It's been pretty smooth sailing for me.
But, Nick, what if I told you it wasn't always this way?
I couldn't agree with you more. As we're about to hear from Darcy Rivard-Kinder, she and many others were quite concerned.
I think that was, for me, for sure, that was an issue. I don't think it was something that, I wouldn't have talked about that with other passengers at the time, but definitely other friends and family would the car continue going or would it stop? And I know in the early days, I can't remember if it was right at the beginning, but I do remember definitely reading and hearing about stories where, the train would just stop on the track somewhere and people would be kind of stranded, I guess is the word to use, for a period of time. That fear of having to get somewhere or wanting to get somewhere and then being derailed, I guess, for lack of a better term, because of the uncertainty of whether it was off the tracks or whether there was, some mechanical issue that prevented the cars from moving. And then, of course, no other cars can come behind. And that was just always, I think, sort of in the back of my mind, more so years ago than now when I visit Vancouver and I ride the SkyTrain. It's not something I think about. I don't worry about going over the bridge portion. It just doesn't seem to be as much of an issue for me personally, I guess, when I ride it, versus then it was like a big thing. Oh my gosh, are we going to get stuck between stations? And then how will we get down? Or do you just sit there? And then, of course, there's no washroom. So if you're there for a period of time, then what happens?
When they first announced it, when they did the demonstration line along Terminal Avenue at Main Street, they were showing off, hey, okay, go for a ride here. And by the way, hey, no one drives this. There's an operator somewhere, and they push all the buttons and make this thing go. And so they tried to ease the public into this. So it wasn't so bad by the time we got to the launch. But for a lot of people who had never heard of such things or are not from the area, this was like some newfangled technology here. Will it last or will it just all fall apart after the World's Fair?
And fall apart, it did not. For the last 37 years, SkyTrain has been the autonomous heartbeat, the lifeblood of the city, and a cultural icon for all of Vancouver.
Now, Nick, we were both born in 2004, making us 18 years old, and we've only really benefited from the modern version of SkyTrain. And we weren't able to experience what it was like back in the the old days with all the hope, with all the dreams. But now, Nick, we were both born in 2004, and we've only known a city of Vancouver with a SkyTrain. It seems inseparable from the actual city itself. We're not able to go back to 1985 when the hope of SkyTrain was just that, hopes and dreams. Rob Chu was able to help us imagine what it would have been like. He brought us some original marketing materials from the SkyTrain, and, well, we kind of got to geek out a little bit. And I'll finish this out with reading the top of the buzzer. All systems go for SkyTrain launch December 11th. The construction phase of your new rapid transit system has now reached completion. Highly trained personnel are ready to take their positions. All transit are go. Is that proper English? Oh, all systems are go. I'm not reading it. All systems are go for an event that will launch a new age in transit service for British Columbia. Well, if that's not predictive, I don't know what is. And on that note, thank you, Rob, for joining us.
Well, welcome to the welcome to the future. Thank you. Thanks, Richard. And thanks, Nick.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for listening to Autonomous Heartbeat, the origins of the Vancouver SkyTrain.
And a big, massive thanks to our wonderful guests, Rob Chu from the Transit Museum Society and Canadian Transit Heritage Foundation,
Stephen Gordon,
and Darcy Rivard Kinder.
Research, production, and hosting done by me, Richard Davis.
And me, Nicholas Poitras.
Mixed and recorded in Control B at 2 Roper Avenue. Clips from our intro and outro are from the documentaries Going to Town from 1985 and On Track from 1983. Permission for use of these clips was provided by BC Transit.
And a special thanks to Ian Foote and Aaron Laforet for saving our asses.
It seems as though the city and the people who are the city have bloomed to fulfill a new sense of destiny, to greet a beckoning capacity for urban maturity and share it with the world.